Okay, everyone. Welcome to this presentation. It's entitled Migraines. Of course, it's about migraine headaches, and it is part of our Awesome Sauce free webinar series from Health Chiropractic and Wellness Center. Before we get rolling, a little bit of information about Body of Health. We're a chiropractic and wellness center located at 985 Northwest 23rd Street in Corvallis, Oregon. We can be reached on the phone at 541-753-1287 or on the internet at yourbodyofhealth.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/bodyofhealth, or on the Twitter at Body of Health. And we have a blog that we try and keep updated. It looks like you only get the OG portion of the address there. But the address is blog.yourbodyofhealth.com. A little info about me. I'm Dr. Jason Young. I'm a chiropractor. I'm also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. By way of education, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Human Biology from Oregon State University and the University of Western States in Portland, Oregon. Also got my Doctor of Chiropractic there. I'm currently a master's candidate for nutrition and functional medicine, Master's of Science through the University of Western States. And formerly, I was an instructor of pathology at Oregon School of Massage in Salem and an instructor of cell biology at Lynn Benton Community College. And right now, in terms of teaching, I do things like these free webinars, and I do continuing education for massage therapists, chiropractic assistants, chiropractors, and anybody who will listen. So before we get started, this presentation is designed to last for about 15 to 20 minutes. So that means we'll try and get to as much information as we can. We probably won't cover all of it. At the end, there will be time for a question and answer. And so you can submit your questions by typing them into the webinar interface there if you're with us live. If you're watching a recording, you can feel free to contact us either on the internet or by phone and ask your questions. So you can do that during or after the presentation. There's a simple quiz at the end for review, and one lucky person who completes the quiz, and your score doesn't necessarily matter, but it would be nice if you got all the answers right. Your score will be drawn at random, your name will be drawn at random to receive your very own Awesome Sauce t-shirt, which looks like this. And so the prize is the t-shirt, not the handsome man in it. Let's go ahead and get rolling. So the big question is, why migraines? Why would I do a presentation on migraine headaches? Well, it's a really a big problem facing the world. It's ranked as the 20th most disabling health problem in the world, and it's number 9 on the list for women. It affects 8% of men and 18% of women in the United States. And actually, you can see there's some disparity in the numbers there. It actually turns out that 75% of migraine headaches occur in women. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons that they think that might be. It causes 112 million sick days from work or school every year in the United States. And so there's some definite economic impact. And the cost of society, conservative estimate, is about $100 billion per year. And so it's not cheap. But that includes time missed from work. It includes the cost of visiting doctors, purchasing medication, receiving treatments, all kinds of stuff. So migraines are definitely worth talking about because if you have information that can help you avoid one, then we can start making a big difference in your life and also the economy and your family and whatnot. So let's start by talking about what is a migraine headache. So there's kind of some misconceptions about migraines. A lot of times I have patients come in and they say, oh yeah, I get migraines. And whenever they say that, until we talk about it further, I always write down migraines and put a little question mark next to it because not everybody understands exactly what a migraine is. What I find is that most people think that a migraine is just a really bad headache. And so like if we were rating headaches on a scale of 0 to 10, they think that the only thing that makes a migraine is that it's like a 9 or a 10. So there are actually headache types out there that are more severe that typically hurt more than migraines and are more debilitating than migraines, but they aren't necessarily migraines. So a migraine headache is a specific type of headache, and it's got some definite characteristics that we can identify. And so we're going to talk about what some of those characteristics are. So first of all, they are severe, and they're debilitating. If you get a migraine headache, it'll probably knock you out for the day. You'll have to leave work or leave school. Typically, when people get migraine headaches, they kind of go into a cave mentality where they just want to crawl into their bed or into a dark room and shut off all the lights and all the sounds and keep everybody away from them until they can kind of weather the storm. And so they are severe and they are debilitating. And also migraines affect half of the head typically. 90% of migraines happen on one side of the head only. And so like this gentleman right here, like if we split him down the middle here, maybe this part of his head would hurt or this part. Now it can change sides. So like let's say he has a migraine headache every month. And so in May, he might have his migraine headache over here, and in June, he has his migraine headache over here. What typically doesn't happen is that you don't get migraines that you feel on both sides at the same time. So sometimes people come in and they're indicating this area right here, and it's like behind both eyes, or it's in the base of the skull, and those typically are not migraines. So 90% of the time, a migraine is going to be on one half of the head. In fact, the word migraine comes from a French word that means pain on one half of the head. And so that's a really pretty clear diagnostic factor in whether it's a migraine headache or not. So migraine headaches may include some prodrome. Prodrome are like the symptoms that you get when before the symptoms. So you know, kind of when there's a storm and you can sort of smell it coming in the air. You know, that's sort of what the prodrome is. It's what you get before the storm. So sometimes people get what's called visual aura, which is floaters, scintillating lights, blind spots, and things like that. I'll show you some pictures of what I mean in a little bit. They might experience strange smells, strange tastes in their mouth. They might have dizziness or feel tired or difficulty concentrating. There's a variety of different types of prodrome that people can experience before a migraine headache. Also, once people get the migraine headache, it's really common that it's accompanied by some hypersensitivity, like lights will cause them to experience a worse headache, sounds, smells. It's just about all the senses are like really amped up, and the slightest thing can make the headache significantly worse. And interestingly enough, with those hypersensitivities, some of those things can also cause migraines, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. The other thing that isn't on the list here, but is pretty common with migraines, is that a lot of times people feel some nausea, and they might even experience vomiting. But nausea and vomiting, they happen with different types of headaches. It's not always just a migraine, but it's definitely one feature of a migraine. So the two basic types of migraines, first of all, there's a classic migraine, and this includes the visual aura. So this is what I was talking about. So you might be enjoying a nice day at the Oregon coast, and you're looking out on the beach, and you see kind of these weird squiggly lines or lights, or it might just be like a dark spot, or some people get like just some darkness in one half of their vision, or or they see like zigzags across their visual field. That's called visual aura, and it's associated, and I'll show you kind of what this looks like. It's associated with a specific part of the brain and what's happening with the neurotransmitters and the blood flow to that part of the brain that causes this type of aura. And then there's also a common migraine where there's no visual aura. I mentioned before that you can have migraines that are on both sides, and typically when you get one of those, it's a common migraine, not a classic migraine. And usually these have tension as a trigger. So it's possible for somebody to have a tension headache that then becomes a migraine headache. So who gets migraines? All of these people. So 75% of the cases, like I said, are in women. And it's thought to be that this has a lot to do with hormones. I know I see a number of patients who have migraines, and in women, it's not uncommon for them to have migraines that are associated with their menstrual cycle. Also, it's not uncommon for women who suffer migraines throughout their entire adult life to have those migraines suddenly resolve after menopause. And so hormones are a definite cause of migraine headaches. In terms of age groups, typically migraines are pretty rare in kids under the age of 10. Typically, when they crop up, it's in people between the ages of 10 to 50. It's not generally understood well why migraines tend to stop after 50, because it's not just women who have migraines sort of drop off after migraines, but men also experience a decrease in migraines once they get over 50. So and that's not really well understood why that happens. Most migraine sufferers are between the ages of 30 to 40 years old, and onset of migraines after the age 50 is really, really rare. And so, that's an important thing. So if you're over 50 and you start having kind of some of these symptoms, and you think that it's a migraine headache and you have no history or something like that, it's really important to get checked out, because there's other types of headaches. There could be like an aneurysm or a stroke or something like that, where that might be your first symptom is a really, really severe headache. Typically, people would describe it as the worst headache that they've ever had in their life. So if you're over 50 and you start to experience a migraine for the very first time in your life, definitely go get that checked out. So before puberty, more migraines, or migraines are more common. Oh, that's a lot of mores for one sentence, isn't it? Migraines are more common for boys than girls, and then at puberty it switches, so that girls suffer more migraines than boys. Americans get more migraines than any other country, and there's a variety of reasons that might be. It's something that could be linked to our access to certain foods or technologies and things like that. I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. 70% of migraine sufferers have an immediate family member with migraines, so that's mom or dad, brother or sister. So migraines definitely run in the family, and but I don't believe in sort of a genetic fatalism where this is what your genes say, and so this is what you're stuck with, and what you need to learn to do is just suffer with it. Our genes respond to our environment, and that's really their main job. And so we have kind of this code in our body, our DNA, that says, when you come in contact with this food or this sort of environment, this is what your body's going to do to react. And so we might have family members who have migraine headaches or some of these conditions, and these migraine headaches are in response to some environmental factor, and that adaptation, it gets handed down from family member to family member. So just because you have migraines and mom has migraines or dad has migraines, it doesn't mean that you're just doomed to have migraine headaches for the rest of your life. There's definitely options and ways to control that. Okay. So one thing I want to show you that's real cool is people who have had migraine headaches, they sometimes do art about it, and this is actually a therapy to help people deal with migraines, because some of them are caused psychologically, but it's kind of neat because you can see like some of the visual aura. See, they have like these twirly and zigzaggy lights, and you can tell this person obviously has fallen into this delusion. Well, that's a problem, right? Let's see, and here we have the puking. It's very colorful. There's the zigzaggies. You can see there's all kinds of foods, and there's the cheese, and there's some sort of fly killer pesticide. There's chocolate. Eggs are a trigger for some people. Pork. There's the loud sounds down here. There's a stereo. There's bright lights. And I think that this is some swearing. So this person obviously is not very happy. Um, that looks like a face that's kind of messed up, a little bit of that visual aura there as well. And you can see there. And then this kind of gives you an idea of the one-sidedness of the headache. So like over here, it's all crazy town, and then over here, it's nice and peaceful and serene. And so that kind of gets the piece about how it's really just one side. And here's a blind spot. So everything else looks normal, but there's a blind spot, so more visual aura. And some blurriness. You can see there's kind of a room in there, but there's these patterns, and so that happens from the change of blood flow to that occipital portion of the brain. And more visual aura and such. So I think those are really interesting. I like showing those whenever I talk about migraines. Okay, so let's talk about what goes on with a migraine headache. And this animation here, actually, if you go to the Wikipedia site for which talks about migraine headaches, this is where I got that animation from. And I stole it because it's a really good one, so that's why I'm giving them credit. So all the mechanisms of migraines are not really well understood, and so our understanding of migraines and where they come from and what causes them and how to treat them, it's all something that's evolving. And in fact, the belief is that there's many potential causes and mechanisms that lead to migraine headaches. So a little bit of anatomy here. So you can see that the headache kind of starts here, and this right here is called your occipital lobe of your brain, and it's part of your cerebral cortex. Your cerebral cortex is where a lot of the action happens in your body, and a lot of your voluntary actions. And this area of the brain happens to be where we process vision. So the eyeballs are here, and then the neurons that process vision, they kind of pass through here back to this portion of the brain. And this is where we recognize objects. This is where we're actually seeing things. And so when you see how this starts, it kind of makes sense that there's some migraines that start with a visual aura because this is where the action is, and then the phenomenon kind of spreads to other areas of the brain. Up here you have like sensory regions of the brain. It's called the parietal portion of the brain, and so you kind of get some spread there. So there's a pattern of blood flow change to the brain, and this is caused by your nervous system. So a lot of times these signals, they start down in the brainstem here, and it could be because of a neurotransmitter deficiency or too much of a neurotransmitter. But what happens with your blood vessels is first you start with a restriction of blood supply in this area, and then there's kind of a rebound effect where then you get those blood vessels in the brain. Once that restriction is kind of noted, they dilate, and it floods this area of the brain with a lot of blood. So then the brain in general, it enters a state of high excitability with a low amount of energy. And so you might have heard of this before. It's glutamate, and it might sound familiar to you, but you don't know where, and you'll realize it in a second where you've heard the word glutamate before. But glutamate is a very important neurotransmitter in our brain. We're not going to go too much into detail because trying not to keep this nerdy, but glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So it basically turns things on, and it enhances things, and it just gets your neurons open and ready to go. So when we're learning new skills, our brain is dumping a bunch of glutamate on neurons in order to strengthen those connections. And so when we get a migraine, there's a high level of glutamate that gets released in the brain, and so it puts your brain in a very excitable state. But on the flip side of that, there's not much energy in the brain. So mitochondria are a part of the cell that produces power. See? Oh, look, this little plug is covering my last word here. So mitochondria are the power plants of the cell. They create cellular energy, and people with migraines, they tend to have mitochondria dysfunction. So that power producing ability just isn't there. So it's kind of like, you know, if you ever been hanging out with some friends and, you know, everybody's like, well, let's go out and do something fun, but nobody can think of anything to do. You know, everybody's ready to party, but you're not able to do it. So then what ends up happening is in this excitable state with low energy, it basically leaves you hypersensitive. So lights start to bug you, tastes start to bug you, sounds start to bug you, and it just drives your brain nuts, and it leads to some inflammation. So your brain's response to this is to try and get more blood to this parietal area of your brain, and so those blood vessels dilate, or they open up to be about 50% larger than normal. And so that's why sometimes when people get migraines, they can feel throbbing in their head, because they can feel all that blood pulsing in their brain. And blood vessels, they have pain neurons to them. So if they get stretched out, it's kind of like you know, overstretching a muscle or a ligament or something. It can be painful. So that's part of where the pain comes from, and the inflammation. And then the other thing, and the reason that the vessels dilate so much is because that area of the brain needs some blood, and so that's a really important thing. And it kind of leads us to this next thing. So are migraines dangerous? So yeah, we know that they hurt, but you know, is it really dangerous? So I already talked about the economic impact a little bit. That the cost of treatment and work loss is over $100 billion per year. Because the average migraine sufferer loses 3.8 days of work a year, so almost 4 days. And then there's also a question about when people experience a migraine, are they also receiving some brain damage? And so it's a valid question. They've done some MRI studies, and it's definitely something that needs to be looked into more. But there's some evidence that people who suffer frequent migraines can have long-term damage to their brain, because each incident is like a little miniature stroke. A stroke is basically when part of your brain isn't getting oxygen, and so when you have a migraine headache and you have these changes in blood flow, it's almost like suffering a little stroke, and so that's an area of concern. So let's talk about what triggers a migraine headache. There's many triggers, and they're important to find, but here's some common ones. So like a lack of sleep. People who suffer migraines, if they stay up for, you know, days on end, or the baby's crying or whatever and they can't get good sleep, it triggers a migraine. High levels of stress can trigger migraines, and for some reasons that I'll discuss in a second. We are talking about hormones, especially around menstruation, can trigger migraines. There's dietary causes like nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies. We'll talk about some of those in a second. Allergies, so some people have allergies to environmental things or certain foods, and those will trigger a headache or a migraine headache. And then here's that word, glutamate, monosodium glutamate, also known as MSG. So if they used to call it Chinese food brain. So you could go to a Chinese food restaurant and maybe they put a bunch of MSG on their food and people get migraine headaches. And so that glutamate is the same type of glutamate that we're talking about in the brain. The reason they put glutamate in food is because, like I said, it amps up your senses, and so anything that you put MSG on, it enhances the taste and the flavor. Well, if you pour some glutamate on the brain, it puts it in a highly excitable state. Amino acid deficits we'll talk about in a second, including tyramine. Tyramine is found in a lot of different foods, fermented foods especially, so cheeses, wines, soy sauce, and things like that. And then also if you have a lack of food, so if like sometimes when people are fasting, they'll experience migraine headaches in response to that lack of food. There's also some sensory stimuli like flashing lights. Like some people have trouble with fluorescent lights, or some people can't go and watch movies on the big screen because the flickering of the projector will trigger a migraine, or watching TV or playing computer games or video games. Heaven forbid that causes you a migraine. And then there's sounds, like my mom used to always say that my music was giving her migraines. There's certain smells. There's different types of stimuli that when you kind of are in a state where your brain's excitable, those stimuli will push you over the edge. And then some people get migraines from physical exertion. So a lot of heavy lifting, any sort of exercise might trigger a migraine for some people. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition. One of the prevailing thoughts is that amino acids and their ability to affect the neurotransmitters in our brain play into migraine headaches a lot. And what neurotransmitters are is it's basically a chemical that sends a signal in your nervous system. So and there's a variety of neurotransmitters. Some of them are excitatory, like glutamate, which turns a bunch of things on. And then you have some that are inhibitory, or they kind of settle things down and cool them out, like dopamine, for example, is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So one important amino acid whenever it comes to migraine headaches is tryptophan. Now, you've all heard of tryptophan because you've all heard of Thanksgiving. And, people say, well, turkey has a lot of tryptophan. Tryptophan is actually in, all kinds of poultry. Turkey is no higher than any other poultry, like chicken or anything like that. But it occurs in foods, and our body uses it to make a variety of neurotransmitters and other chemicals like melatonin. And one of the important ones in terms of our discussion here is serotonin. So serotonin is an important neurotransmitter because it affects our mood, our sensory perception, our appetite, the diameter of our blood vessels, and things like that. You can supplement tryptophan if you're not getting enough in diet, or if your body needs extra because it doesn't metabolize it well. You can supplement it as 5-HTP, which you'll find it pretty much grocery stores, vitamin stores, anywhere. It's a really common supplement, and it can be helpful for people who suffer from some depression or migraine headaches. And serotonin is also elevated with exercise, so it's a good way to build up your serotonin. If your headaches aren't triggered by exercise, then that's a little counterproductive. Okay. So let's see. Another amino acid, tyrosine, is an important one. Now, this one kind of works the opposite direction. This amino acid has tyramine as a byproduct, and if you remember, tyramine is a common migraine trigger. So, that's what you would find in red wines and chocolate and fermented foods and things like that. So people who get too much tyrosine, or they're kind of overactive with their tyrosine, they can suffer some migraine headaches too. Vitamins and minerals are important to the whole migraine picture because vitamins and minerals act as what's called cofactors. So you have enzymes, which are chemicals that speed along chemical reactions in your body, and if you don't have enough cofactors, then your enzymes don't work either. Magnesium is a very important mineral that acts as a cofactor to just about every single major biological process in your body. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you're going to have some problems. And these are really common problems that we don't think about. Things like constipation, muscle cramps, migraine headaches. There's just a variety of things that are caused whenever people aren't getting enough magnesium. And an interesting thing about magnesium is your body dumps magnesium when you're under a lot of stress. And so there's a lot of people that can get kind of magnesium poor, and it causes these symptoms. And so that's an important thing. And what they find in a lot of studies is that supplementing magnesium can actually help people reduce migraine headache occurrence. And so supplementation, usually people supplement about 400 to 500 milligrams, but you need to be careful because getting too much magnesium in your diet can cause diarrhea, which nobody likes. And also, you might want to check if you're taking prescription medications. You might want to check with your prescribing doctor, because there might be some interactions between, excuse me, magnesium and your medication. And so we wouldn't want to make you worse off by supplementing magnesium. Now, for some people, if you get like diarrhea or problems like that when you're supplementing magnesium, what you do is you just cut back your dose until you get to a point where it doesn't have that effect on you. Or you can spread out, like if you're taking 100 milligram magnesium supplements, you can space out when you're taking them and try and kind of lessen the load. But getting magnesium, it cures a whole, it helps a whole bunch of stuff, including some of the things that end up leading to migraine triggers, such as insomnia or muscle cramps or stress and things like that. Okay, and then in terms of treating migraines, we're almost there. There's a lot of different ways to treat migraines. There's all kinds of old wives' tales and things like that. And then there's some things that have been studied really well. I put chiropractic at the top of the list here for a few reasons. Number one, because I'm a chiropractor. Number two, because it is effective. And in preparing this presentation, I went out there and I looked at some websites like the Mayo Clinic and WebMD and things like that, because I wanted to see, when the average person goes and looks for information on migraines, what are they getting in terms of the information as to what they can do to treat it. And I was really shocked because none of the major sources that I found mentioned chiropractic, which must be some sort of crazy conspiracy or something, because there's a significant amount of research out there that indicates that chiropractic is one of the more effective treatments on par with a lot of the medication treatments that are out there. So on my list, I put chiropractic on the top and I put medications on the bottom, just because it's time to highlight all the treatments really, and there's significantly fewer risk factors associated with chiropractic than with some of the other medications. So massage is also very effective. Avoiding dietary and stress triggers are very, very important to treating migraines. If you know what causes them and you can stay away from them, then for a lot of people you can completely eliminate your migraine headaches. And sometimes this takes some working through with a provider, because you might not suspect some of the things that might cause a migraine headache. Like, for example, you could be eating some sort of a food that has what's called an anti-nutrient in it, which keeps you from absorbing minerals like, zinc or iron or magnesium, and it leaves you a little bit deficient. And so, beyond just supplementing with things, also avoiding certain things in your diet can help you to get to the point where you're a little poor in minerals or nutrients. Acupuncture has been found to be effective for treating migraine or preventing migraines. That's what we're talking about now. And supplementing, like I said, with magnesium, with 5-hydroxytryptophan, the 5-HTP, so that you can get some serotonin. That's also really effective for preventing. And then, of course, there's medications. There's a few different classes like triptans and ergotamines and antidepressants. Depression is actually a really common condition that happens with migraines. There's a significant number of people who have migraines and also suffer from chronic depression. And so antidepressants, there's a class called serotonin uptake inhibitors, or reuptake inhibitors, or SRIs, or SSRIs, sorry. And what they do is they give your body or your brain access to the serotonin for longer. And serotonin is a vasoconstrictor, and it helps those blood vessels not to be so overwhelmed and engorged. And then there's ways to treat acute headaches. So we talked about those are ways to prevent migraines. These are ways to treat them once you have them. And oh, look, at the top of the list again, it's chiropractic. And massage, acupuncture, getting lots of rest and sleep, And then there's medications like NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. We're talking about like Advil, ibuprofen, Aleve, Excedrin. And a lot of the evidence says that if you take those medications with caffeine, so like you'll find Excedrin migraine has caffeine in it, it actually makes those NSAIDs more effective in terms of helping to reduce symptoms. And so, one thing that I should mention is in terms of effectiveness, what they found, like I mentioned, the chiropractic and medications are about on par in terms of their effectiveness. Unfortunately, the statistics say that the effectiveness is right around 50%, maybe a little bit higher. So because there's so many different causes of migraine headaches, unfortunately, there's no one cure for all headaches. So I can't sit here and tell you, oh, yeah, if you get an adjustment, that's definitely going to fix your migraine headache. Or if you take some triptans like Imitrex or something like that, then that's definitely going to fix your headache. Or acupuncture is definitely going to fix your migraine. And so, unfortunately, I mean, people need to kind of search for a treatment that works really well for them. But it's definitely something that's treatable and avoidable. So that's it for all the planned presentation. What we'll do now is I'm going to unmute everybody, and then we'll go ahead and go into our questions and answers. I think everybody should be on a multivitamin, multi-mineral supplement, but there's some people that need a little bit extra, so I do recommend magnesium by itself, with the caveat that you should also be taking a multivitamin, multi-mineral. The other piece of that is that magnesium does not stay in your system if you are overly acidic, and so you should be consuming an alkaline diet, like lots of leafy green vegetables, avoiding things that are really acidic, like a lot of citrus or sugars or things like that. Feverfew, it is good and effective for some people in terms of helping with migraines. I would say the percentage of people that respond really well to feverfew is probably smaller, but it definitely is something that you'll find commonly in migraine headache remedies. And there's been some studies on whether feverfew is effective, and yeah, it definitely works for some people.